This is Sandy Tankus for TOS50.com, and I'm here today speaking with Chaplain Leon Olenick here in sunny Florida. Good afternoon, Rabbi.
Hi, Sandy. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. And I understand that you were originally a pork trader. Is that correct?
That is correct. From a pork trader to a rabbi to a rabbi chaplain.
Well, how does that happen? How does somebody who was a pork trader suddenly become a rabbi?
Well, I'll try to give it to you in a nutshell. I bought and sold 40,000-pound truckloads of pork, and I had my own business. But the spiritual part was always within my heart. Having 3 children, some in college, I couldn't afford to go to a regular yeshiva. I had to support them. So in my office, the pork trading starts about 5:30 in the morning. It's usually finished around noon. And at noon, I would go into my private office, tell my secretary just interrupt me if there's a problem, and study Torah. And with different rabbis all around the country. And it took me 11 years. However, I made it. So thanks to pork, I became a rabbi and a chaplain.
Well, that was the next question I was going to ask you. It's one thing to be a rabbi, and we're used to seeing congregational rabbis rabbis in college campuses. But you went on to become a chaplain, and you went on to become a hospice chaplain.
Correct.
And that's kind of unique. So tell me how that happened.
Well, my call has always been really connecting with the heart, the spiritual part of people. And I decided, one of my requirements, I hadn't decided actually, was to take what's called CPE, Clinical Pastoral Education, which you have to take in order to be a chaplain. And I had to take 1 unit, which is 3 months, as a requirement. I ended up taking 2 years. Mm-hmm. Get my board certification, and I fell in love with it. I felt like I was doing so much, and I was really hitting the neshama, the soul of everybody, and I knew it was my calling at that point, that I had to do this kind of work, that this was where the Holy One wanted me to be.
Well, when you're working in hospice, you work only with Jewish people?
No, I work with people of all religions. If you look in my trunk, I have rosary beads of many colors that I hand out to my Catholic patients. Christian patients, I have everything. When I was, I have prayer rugs for my Muslim patients. When you're doing chaplaincy, a soul is a soul. We forget the labels. And obviously my Jewish patients too, but we forget the labels.
Well, when you're working with hospice, explain to me what happens. Somebody calls hospice, then what happens?
Well, in order to be admitted to hospice, you have to have a diagnosis of that you're going to have 6 months or less to live by 2 physicians. And then people will choose a hospice. I work for Vitas Hospice. So we'll get the call, and there's a face sheet that has all the person's information on it. And at that point, the doctor will go out within 2 days to visit, the nurse immediately, a home health aide immediately, a chaplain immediately, within 3 days, and a social worker. And we work in a team, so everybody knows what the other one is doing, and we assess. As a chaplain, I go out and I do what's called a spiritual assessment. So I assess not only the patient, because some of the patients are comatose or have Alzheimer's or end-of-life things where they cannot respond. But one of my main things is being with the family. Okay, the family has started their grief process already. Maybe they're in shock that the diagnosis is 6 months or less. So I start working with the family immediately and stick with the family as well as the patient. Sometimes the patients are very aware. It depends.
Well, once a person dies, is that the end of your service?
That's definitely not. Definitely not. I go within the same day. They will get a phone call from me, if necessary, a physical visit from me if they wish. Sometimes we'll officiate at the funeral or a funeral service. And I've done funeral services not only for Jewish people, because the family has become attached to me. And then we go, they'll receive up to 18 months or more. They'll receive phone calls, where the grief groups are, whatever they need. Everybody gets my phone number. And I'll have calls sometimes from people who passed 2 years ago. And all of a sudden it will hit them. It might be a yurt site, the anniversary of the death, or it might be something else. And they'll call and they'll need a visit. If they're out of town, I will either Skype or speak to them on the phone.
So and you feel very rewarded by doing this work?
You know, sometimes after work, I look up and I say, I'm getting paid for this? Because it's so wonderful. It fills me up so much. A lot of people ask me, how could you do hospice work? And my answer is, how can I not?
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure speaking to you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you. And hopefully, if anybody ever needs anything, there's hospices all over the country. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing. And thank God it's supported by the government. So please don't hesitate. Don't let your loved one be in pain. Let them leave the world with dignity and grace and love.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.